Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by author and music composer Christopher Kaufman. Christopher has been writing fantasy for a long time. He has his doctorate in music composition, so we're going to be talking to him about that. And even during the show, we will be viewing some of his musical composition and how he does it in his own unique way. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Very glad to be here with you.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I'm a composer, an author, a concert presenter, teacher, illustrator, and I've been composing for a long time. I started writing, or actually, I should say, I've started creating the fantasy story books with beautiful illustrations, colorful illustrations, going back to when I was, let's say, 9 years old. And then a few years later, I went to the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts in New Orleans, and I started music. I had great teachers there. Ellis Marcellus, Wynton Marcellus's father was one of my teachers, and they were classmates, actually, Wynton and Branford. And so a lot of talented people were there. My main teacher was a fellow named Dr. Bro, who was of the more classical vein and a great teacher. He did all kinds of things. He had me, I sang the solos in Messiah, the bass solos. I studied oboe with the principal oboist of the New Orleans Philharmonic and started piano and composing under his tutelage. And then basically I got hooked into music and I lived the life of a composer. I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music and Ithaca College and studied with Pulitzer Prize-winning composers and the like, and made all kinds of musical friends and composed tons of music. And all the way through my doctorate at Cornell University, where I studied with Pulitzer Prize winner Carl Husa and all these people. And but my stories never left me, you see. I'm the type of person that, when I go to sleep at night, I have to have a kind of involving, imaginative scenario, to get myself into sleepy land. And so the way it evolved was at the time that I completed my advanced degrees in music composition and all of that, I also had in my mind the complete event structure of Tales of the Ocean City, my classical fantasy epic story, all the way through book 8, which I'm completing now. So that's like I've been working on this Tales of the Ocean City for I don't know, 35 years or something like that. And then, but I started writing it down in the early 2000s, and it was good, it was okay, but it wasn't quite happening until I started my home laboratory with the Logic program. I did music for independent films and all this and developed all these techniques. And then I said, hey, why not? And so I had this full orchestra in my computer, and I started narrating out loud the words for Tales of the Ocean City and composing the music that goes with it at the same time. It's like symphonic, dramatic, epic, symphonic music, cinematographic music, I call it sometimes, and fusing together. So I started composing the music, saying the words out loud, and conceiving of the story and getting all filled out all at the same time. And that's when it really happened. And I found my voice as a fantasy writer by doing it that way. And I continue to this day.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you mentioned New Orleans because I'm originally from Louisiana.
Ah, sure. It's a great
Southwest
place.
part. So you mentioned music and how you put it in your story. So talk to the listeners about how music is so important and it plays a role in your storytelling.
Yes, thank you. It's really vital. In fact, in these first two books of Tales of the Ocean City, I think of I don't call them audiobooks, I call them audio albums because there's so much music. In fact, back then, Audible in those places I couldn't even get it on there because the music was so, strong. In fact, sometimes I think that the story and text are accompanying the music rather than the other way around. So it's really important, and the narration is interactive with the music. So I might say a phrase, and the music will respond and hear, and the other way around too. So it's very fundamental. And of course, the principles and of being of music, the principles of music, like I'm talking about, like how music harmony, no matter what kind of music, time period, classical, jazz, whatever you call it, it's about creating a complexity or a thicker, more complex texture and resolving it to a more consonant one. So there's this interplay, this constant expression of building up of things and resolving them. And then so that's my story really responded to that as I was composing and saying it and writing it at the same time, that, this buildup of obstacles that are overcome, like the first book. It's called Battle in the Sky, and just briefly, it starts off, with the main characters, Harloot, who's a young man, and Vespucian, who is a kind of telepathic Pegasus, very intelligent. They're co-equal, and they're like family. They're really closely bonded, and they speak to each other in inner dialogue, telepathic throughout, which is really fun to write and experience. Anyway, they're flying over the southern plain. They're ready to go to join in the life of the ocean city. He's growing up a little bit, and then he sees the Princess Brynlin and her Parianth bond, as they're called. The Pegasi are called Parianths. They're different than Pegasi, but they're similar to it enough for the image to get in your mind and progress from there. And he's going to go over and say hello, and then they're attacked. They're attacked by these warriors that are called the Vorm, like transmogrification. They come in random shapes and sizes. But it's a whole long story about the backstory and how they come from. But in any case, they're attacked. And the whole first book is this long, visceral, powerful, fun, exciting battle scene. That's why it's called Battle in the Sky. And it has, you know, buildup of intense obstacles and challenges that resolve just magnificently, just really in an ecstatic way at the end. It's very powerful the way the ending resolves all of this that happens. And so the music, being a composer, made all of that happen in this really organic way that, continues to happen through the books. There's the first 5 books are like a series called the Vorm War, and books 4 and 5 are the epic battle scenes and all this kind of stuff that happens as they confront the past, because it says from the beginning, the Tales of the Ocean City is a story about a civilization turning the corner into the future. But first, they must face this terrible enemy from the deep past. Actually, goes back to when they were evolving as a species. This conflict goes way, way back into their lives and their histories, and they have to, resolve that obstacle before they can move into the future. Right, just like we do in our lives. Good fantasy is often metaphorical in many ways, and it is in my work. And so they move forward into the future, the next follow-on series and stuff like that. But the music is everywhere in it, and of course, there's actual music all over the place, and they have themes and that relate to the different characters, and the music for flight. There's a lot of images and experiences of flight as he's flying on Vespucian's back through, all kinds of situations, whether it's idyllic or it's a battle scene or what have you. And so you get music that reflects all of these different levels, and it really enhances the experience, so you know how to feel about everything, so the emotions are very strong as well. Tales of the Ocean City is the epic tale about a young civilization turning the corner into the future. But first they must face a terrible enemy from the deep past. The main characters are a young man named Harloot and his lifelong companion Vespucian, who is a Parianth, a kind of telepathic Pegasus. Book 1, Battle in the Sky.
"Vespucian, aloft!" cried Harloot. With a thrust of her wings, the white Pegasus shot upwards through billowing clouds. Harloot stood with his arms held out, balancing on her back. They burst into vast heights, the realm of Kurlra, the morning sun. Whose powerful beams illumined iridescent mist on his golden spear. Far below, the ocean roared and thundered. Vespucian reached the pinnacle of her high arc. Now, she thought to him. The Pegasus hovered, and Harloot dove backwards from her haunches. In a swan dive, he clove through tiers of frothing clouds. He used his chest and arms to glide in a spiral through the planet Terroir's thick atmosphere. He reached the cool, misty air just below the clouds, jackknifed and straightened, and sliced right into the churning ocean currents. Dark purples and greens suffused his eyes as he penetrated cold, shadowy depths. He arched his back, frog-kicked, and drifted lazily up towards a ceiling of shimmering blue light. A quick flash of fiery light caught Harloot's eye. He saw a circlet of fire jade winding through the Princess Brineland's hair, which flowed about her neck and shoulders like a cloud of red and orange flames. A scarlet ribbon wound around her lithe form and down her back to meet an abundant sash. A skirt of loose swags flared about her legs in the wind. Harloot cleared his mind with a mesmerizing vision, stood on Vespucian's back, and prepared to utter his call and greeting. But Vespucian suddenly pulled up short in the air and mouthed a rasping bark. Her telepathic voice rang in his mind. "Danger! Alarm! Enemy!" Harloot instantly hunched over, gripped the mesh along her withers with one hand, and craned his neck up and to the left. He followed Vespucian's stark gaze. Multicolored whorls dissipated in the thick glaze of morning light. A blur formed at the edge of his vision and separated into 3 jagged shapes growing in size. Blood-red streaks rent the air as 3 giant warriors riding massive red and black Parianths shot past, heading directly towards the princess. Followed by a venomous, sweet, acrid miasma, sliced through Harloot's senses. All went dark.
Well, I know that you have a favorite fantasy author, Lloyd Alexandra, so explain to the listeners why Lloyd Alexandra is your favorite fantasy author.
Thank you very much for that question. So that's a real core question. is this particular writer, Lloyd Alexander. He wrote the Chronicles of Prydain, which you may know. They made some bad Disney movies, but it's really powerful stuff. The main thing is that you can find it. If you look him up on YouTube, you can see an interview. And in that interview, he talks about how he wrote books for a long time for grown-ups, adults, and they were fine and good and they were successful. But when he started writing for the younger audience, for young people, instead of it didn't become, you might expect, oh, the emotions, the situations become more trite or something like that. But he said, no, the opposite is it got deeper. The emotions and the experiences and the experience of writing it and everything got deeper and more powerful. It was the opposite. So I have had that experience and I identified with it because I have a career as a concert composer, writing all kinds of serious pieces and string quartets and symphonic tone poems and environmental pieces and chamber works, all these things. But when I write the Tales of the Ocean City, it just it's very fulfilling and deep and powerful. And so I identified with his life story as an artist. And the particular works, the Chronicles of Prydain, are just wonderful and they're just perfect, like glorious fantasy books. And he was the one that speaks about, like Tolkien would say that sure, fantasy is an escape. I mean, it's like you're escaping from a prison camp, so you are honor bound to escape and to bring as many people with you as you possibly can. It's you're honor bound to do it. But Lloyd Alexander says more. He talks about more the metaphoric aspect that you're really in a fantasy situation. You're talking about all the different characters, the monsters, all the different people. They're metaphors for us and our lives, and different aspects of our lives are being personified in the story. And then you can talk about those different levels of one's humanity and our joined, collective humanity in this situation and how things happen and resolve or don't resolve, or whatever happens. We're talking about our lives and our people, our insides, our psychology.
Well, you've been talking about the arts and all that good stuff and the great benefits that it provides. So talk about some ways that we all can participate in the arts and reap the benefits that you're talking about.
Sure. Well, I believe in the transformative power of imagination, and that in our present situation, in our lives, in our culture, the imagination has been demeaned. It's been deflated. It's been attacked. I have a story, the Fantastic Zoo, where children go into a fantastic zoo and they hear the stories of the phoenix and the mermaid and the dragon. And the dragon is talking about the war on imagination that we experience now. It's misused. It's degraded. I mean, we live in cubicles, and we don't go outside and see the horizon in the forest and experience nature as we used to. The buildings, they have these fluorescent lights, so it's very gray and where it used to be. I mean, you go outside and you see what used to be a glorious, beautiful ecology of natural life, and it's now a parking lot, literally paved over, like deadened. And then you even see parking lots for a place that's, the business is out of business, but you still have this dead parking lot sitting there, right? So we need to. And then that reflects in our psychologies. People might feel more limited. They might feel less enthusiastic or ecstatic or passionate. The emotions might be dulled. And by experiencing and diving into the great fantasy stories, for example, it's more than that, but there's other, you can go to modern dance and all kinds of things, any kind of art form, especially if you do it yourself at home. You could paint, you could do anything. I know a lot of older people who start playing cello, they're retired, but they play, and it opens things up for them, the vibrations of them, it's the strings. But especially in a fantasy story, then you can, infuse your life with imagination once again. mythologies, fantasy stories, music. And, then everywhere you look, it's brighter, there's more color, and you're interpreting everything around you in a much more, evocative, alive, fun way. So you can't get bored because you can be standing in line and, something like that and just go into your imagination and imagine things, the clouds if you're traveling, or if you're in a situation like in a classroom and the teacher is saying things you already know and it's boring. Well, you can imagine all kinds of things going on around it. You can turn bullies into orcs that you have the experience of defeating because you read The Lord of the Rings, and you can just feel, I'm going to feel like Aragorn's energy in me, and I'm going to get through this situation. It might be just getting up in front of a classroom and speaking or whatever it is you're going to do. And, or it's just, a staff meeting. It's boring. You can feel and infuse yourself with all of these energies that you glean from your imagination, that you feed your imagination through, well, in one scenario, one instance, great fantasy stories, which are a great way to do it.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Well, let's talk about some of the autobiographical elements of your stories.
Okay, that's another good question. I was talking about book 1, The Battle in the Sky, where Harloot and Vespucian go over the southern plain. They see the princess. They get into a battle, and there's this long battle scene. Well, the Vorm warriors are led by a really vicious, kind of terrifying chieftain character. He's huge and he's imposing, and he by the end of the story of book 1, the Princess Brian Lynn is fighting this creature and being wounded and beat up by it a lot, and she ends up wounded at the end of the story. Now, spoiler alert, she returns later in the books as an almost superhero-like character and has a great arc and becomes a leader. But at this point, she's like fallen, and her arm, she's been maimed. Her hand has been cut off when she was fighting, and the blade of and so anyway, I realized, and Harloot, he's over here fighting, but he's witnessing it, and I realized that I was kind of reliving things I experienced when I was young, which was a very unfortunate kind of abusive situation. And I saw my father be violent with my sister, right? And then I realized that that's what I was reliving. And that added to the ecstasy of the resolve later on and the powerfulness of the story. And so I realized that the character Brian Lynn, the princess, was kind of infused with my sister, like that. My sister was Brian Lynn, and then later at that time, the sister twain, the captains of the guard, arrive with the king, and they are these two sisters, these powerful, warrior sister characters. And originally I had them given different names, but then when I realized what was going on with this story, I renamed them Alacia and Alaxa, and my two sisters are named Alice and Alexandria. So Alexandria actually is in there twice. She's Brian Lynn and Alexa, and anyway, things like that. And then so names changed, and I realized this character represented my stepfather, who came in and helped saved our family in a way, and he's the one that saves Brian Lynn from being killed, and all this kind of stuff started coming into it, and it just added power to the story and this whole cathartic nature of the resolve and what happens in it through this book one and in the future books. And so I think it's therefore, no, there's a lot of people who read the book who don't know that, but I've had some people who had challenging lives when they were young who really loved this story. And I think that was why, because it was infused with this solving of these problems, like whether it's music or it's autobiographical, it's, part of the story. Oh, another one, a good one is the Priants, the telepathic Pegasi characters. They're their own civilization, and highly intelligent, all this kind of really fascinating characters. But the way they're close, Harloot and Vespucian. Well, I realized that Vespucian, the Perianths, are based on our animal friends. And as I grew up, I was very close with my dogs, especially one I named Anarion after a character from The Lord of the Rings. And I almost thought sometimes we had like telepathic connection to us. And so the connection between, the animal friends and all these things are, part of the autobiography of the story.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Well, yes, I'm working on book 8. And these stories, the chapters, I call them episodes because they're actually organized that way, like radio drama episodes. And so I'm going to it's going to be a little while because I have to get like 13 episodes up front, and then I'm going to put it out as a podcast where there's an episode a week. And then the second half of the podcast episode will be readings and some interviews and music and soundtracks, all kinds of different things. It's like a variety show. And once a year, another completely different project, I put on a concert called the Fantastic Theater. It's kind of my arts education outreach program. And I present new music and art to people of all ages all at once. So that comes along on a regular basis. So you can go to, people can visit me at my home website, which is soundartist.com. And that's Sound Art Us. Sound Artist. Actually, Dr. Sound Artist was a character from one of my other books, The Musical Forest, which is a whole other story. It's like a family theater piece. And so Sound Artists, you go there and there's a lot of things. You can press the composer button to hear my music. I have a music player on there. You can press theatrical productions to see these musical plays I've created. You can go to the Fantastic Theater and see all that's going on with that, or just press the author, and that'll take you to talesoftheoceancity.com, which is all about the books. And I also have a YouTube channel, which is also called Sound Artists, Sound Art Us. And there's a lot there. I have films of some of my theater productions. I have all these book trailers and some readings, performances. And that's something that I'll be doing regularly in the spring is live readings of Tales of the Ocean City. I have a portable beautiful screen, LED screen that I carry around on wheels, and then a Bose PA system and a microphone. So I do like the audio album, but the music doesn't, I do the narration live, in other words, with the music integrated in the way it is in the audio album. And I do like scenes from the stories.
All right. Well, that was my next question. Your website, soundartus.com.
Yes.
So close us out with some final thoughts, maybe if that was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Well, something we've said but can't be emphasized enough, and that is to reinfuse and reinvigorate your imagination in every way you can. Everyone's different. You might have other experiences other than the great fantasy stories that I have from my youth, and you can find like Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth online, and it just is very powerful stuff that it just reinvigorates your life, and it just can be very transformative. So go for it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, soundartus.com. Be sure to check out everything that Christopher's up to. Check out the books, check out the music, and keep up with everything that he's up to and gonna be up to. Please be sure to follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. And if you want more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, please visit www.curveball337.com and be sure to share the website to as many people as possible. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Christopher, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Curtis. Really appreciate it.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.